Hey guys, I wanted to talk about nasal vestibulitis today. My name's Michelle and I have breast cancer, and I appreciate you stopping by, listening, following, liking, sharing, commenting. So I don't quite remember if I brought any of this up previously, but I feel like there are a lot of little things that happen when you are going through cancer treatment that you don't really hear about. And I feel like this is one of them. So I'm going to say, actually, it was over 2 months ago. I started to have what felt like on this nostril inside, what felt like a pimple on the inside. And if you've ever had a pimple on the inside of your nose, you know how painful that can be. It is just painful for no good reason. And then it wasn't quite a pimple. It felt like it because it just felt like there was a bump in there. And then it scabbed up and it just really, really hurt. And it was just so painful. And I left it alone for a while. And then it just kept, the scab part just kept getting bigger. And then at some point, I started to have the same thing over on this side. This side was always worse, but this side started to join the party. And I was very dry. I was very dehydrated. And I kind of originally thought that it was because of that, the whole dehydration thing, because I've had severe dehydration throughout this whole process, which is a normal side effect. And I did talk, I've had videos about that. I specifically had one video about how to stay hydrated. So if you're interested in that, go check that one out. But so I just kind of figured, well, everything is dry. My sinuses were dry. I had gotten saline. I had all kinds of things to help keep everything, moist and the way that it's supposed to be. So I kind of thought that's what it was. So I had had previously this saline gel that helped keep my nostrils, that helped keep everything moist in there. And so I thought, well, if I use this, at least it won't be like a hard, like it was like a hard scab on the inside of my nose, both nostrils. So I was putting this saline on there, saline gel. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it was so painful. It was getting to be painful to the touch, just on the outside. If I happened to do that, it was so painful. And because I thought it was related to my dehydration, when I went for my treatment at the end of May, I brought it up at treatment, and they basically said, they're like, we don't think that that's related. You should talk to your primary care physician. So, okay. A week or two later, I went to my primary care physician. I told him all about it, and he thought that it had something to do with inflammation in my sinus cavities, because I was also having a lot of post-nasal drip. And he said that oftentimes if you have inflammation there, it can create the post-nasal drip, and then create like a pre-nasal drip, and that can also cause scabbing in your nose. Okay, that all seemed to make sense. So he gave me a nasal spray for the inflammation. I don't remember what it's called. It's not one of the usual ones. It's not something to help with allergies or a stuffy nose, because I didn't have a stuffy nose. It wasn't that I had mucus. It's that I had inflammation. So it was to deal with the inflammation. And so I used that for the time I was supposed to, which is I think about 2 weeks, I believe, maybe 10 days or 2 weeks. And I did notice that inflammation went down. I had a reduction in my post-nasal drip. And for a little while, the scabbing did seem to go down, but then eventually it did not. So again, I'm like, okay, something's not working here. Now we're going on, at this point, probably a month of me dealing with that. Now we're talking end of June, maybe early July. So I brought it up again to my oncologist. What do you think about this? In the meantime, I had done some Googling, and I Googled my symptoms, and what I discovered, there's something called nasal vestibulitis. And many of the most common triggers are things that I just don't do. I mean, one of them was for me, but frequent nose picking was one. Um, plucking hairs, plucking nose hairs, which I don't do either of those things. One did apply with frequent nose running, which especially when I was in full chemo and I had no hair, I had no nasal hair. So my nose was just running all the time. I was like, okay, that maybe fits. But then when I dug a little bit deeper, what I found was that it is actually a fairly common thing for people receiving cancer treatment. Um, and it is actually a sort of a form of staph infection that happens in the nose. And because you're going through chemo, your body cannot fight infections the way that it normally would. I had throughout my whole entire my entire chemo process, I had two skin staph infections that had to be dealt with. Whereas on antibiotics 2 different times for that. So that made a lot of sense to me, and the symptoms, everything just lined up perfectly with that. So I presented that to my oncologist, and they said, well, we don't really know. They suggested I go to a dermatologist, which didn't really feel quite right. So I went back to my primary care physician, and I explained to him, I said, look, I looked this up. I mentioned the term to him, and he said, oh, well, that's something that I've never heard of before. I learned something today. So we went ahead and he gave me a prescription for this ointment that is supposed to help, this Mupricin, it's called, something like that. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. There was a little trouble getting it from my pharmacist, getting it approved through my health insurance, but ultimately it did, which is great. I actually switched insurance in the meantime. That's a whole other story. Anyway, it wound up getting approved, and within a week, it's gone. And it has been gone. It has not come back. I have no pain. I have no scabbing. I have no soreness. I have no bumps. I have nothing on the inside of my nose. And this particular prescription, I did call back to I did speak with the doctor's office and find out how long you're supposed to take it. She said, we gave you a double dose. Just take it until everything gets better. And then if it comes back again, use it again. So now I'm kind of fully stocked with this ointment, which is great because I hope this doesn't come back again, but if it does, I'm prepared. Anyway, so that is something to be on the lookout for, that if you are going through chemo and you start having like some, pain inside your nose that feels like a pimple, but it's not a pimple. If it starts to scab up, if it's, to be honest, it kind of felt a lot like it was like hard snot that was in my nose, like hard, like it's like, and I would try to leave it alone for a while, but it would build up so much, and the pain was so difficult. It was just so uh, unbearable that I would take some time at home at night, and I would get a damp paper towel, and I would kind of soften, to be gross about it, but I would stick the paper towel up my nose and soften everything, and then I would clean out what was in my nose. And then it would just, within a couple of days, it would build right back up again. And then we'd go through this all over again. Probably every 5 days or so, I was cleaning out the inside of my nose because it was so incredibly painful. And now here we are. This is March. This is August 16th today. This went on since the middle. I didn't even present it to my oncologist right away. I waited because I figured that this was something that had to do with the dehydration. So, and I figured I'll just bring it up when I go to treatment. So I probably was dealing with it for about 2 weeks before I even brought it up to the oncologist. So we're going back to middle of May to June, July, August, 3 months of dealing with this. Do yourself a favor. If you have that experience, mention the term nasal vestibulitis. Look it up. Let's see if I can spell it right. Nasal, 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 and then vestibulitis is Vestibulitis. I'll try to put a link in the comments. But yeah, so let me know. Did you have something like that too? What was your experience with that? I do have a friend that also has autoimmune disease, and she also experienced something very similar to this in her life multiple times, and no one was able to diagnose it for her. So it does seem to be related. If you have an autoimmune disease, your immune system is all out of whack. And when you're on chemotherapy, your immune system is all out of whack. So it does kind of make sense that something like this could happen. So yeah, let me know. Leave a little note in the comments. Okay. Take care, guys.